Nothing like your relationship to make you feel like the most adored person in the world one day and the most misunderstood, out in the cold individual the next. But that's just the nature of a lot of relationships. Now, unfortunately, when we get together, oftentimes we're pretty blindsided by the chemical attraction side of things. You know, we look for commonalities, and generally when looking for commonalities, we tend to look at more superficial things, you know, kind of shared hobbies or shared likes or shared activities, all things that at a surface level will keep you together, but that reflect nothing about your core values, your core beliefs as a person, your aspirations, where it is that you want to go in life and what it is that you actually stand for. And it's not that we're ignoring these things, it's just that we're filtering them out, because that's what the process of falling in love is. You know, we tend to go through a stage of infatuation where we choose to, I suppose, not focus on aspects of a person that normally we'd be a little bit, oh, you know, I don't know about that. And that happens to everybody. And I suppose as the relationship flourishes and deepens, things like that become an issue. Generally, the things that were always going to annoy us all of a sudden become a real irritant. And it's then that we have a choice. It's then that we can both look at each other and decide to explore what it is that will actually keep us and sustain us as a couple, and whether or not that's going to be sufficient to sustain us as a couple. And that involves looking at yourself as an individual, because oftentimes we're very quick, once the honeymoon phase is over, to point the finger. And I see this so much, and I suppose it really I suppose worries me, the use of terms like, oh, my ex was a narcissist, or, you know, they had a mental health issue, or, you know, there was no boundaries in place. And people talk about a lot of this terminology without fully understanding, I think, what it actually means, but also without taking responsibility and ownership for their own role in the demise of a relationship. Because ultimately, relationships are co-created, no matter what anyone says. And whilst the fault in any particular argument or the row may vary a little bit, somebody always plays a part. And if you're not willing to step up and take ownership for the role that you're playing in the relationship, well, then maybe you need to take a look at whether or not you have the maturity to be in a relationship to begin with. You know, it's about recognizing, and that doesn't mean that you have to fix them. I mean, God knows I'm shite at certain things in the relationship. I have so many things that I need to work on, and that I try to work on a continuous basis, and that sometimes I'm more successful at than others. But at least it's kind of recognizing those faults and failings and being honest about them. You know, being sitting in your integrity, being very humble about the fact that you're not the perfect partner, and being able to communicate this to your partner, letting them know that you see your faults and failings, taking responsibility for your role within the relationship. Because we have all of these things going on. We have these constructs of what we think a relationship should be, how we think our partner should be. We have our attachment style, which is very much reflective of the relationship that we would have had with our primary caregiver or our mother, you know. And again, this really impacts on our ability to trust and to, I suppose, break down the walls in a relationship and to attach securely to another person without feeling a need to be very clingy or to be avoidant, and, you know, to keep a certain amount of distance in place. And getting a better understanding of these things is integral to showing up in your relationship to the best of your ability. It's also about recognizing that oftentimes in relationship there is a miscommunication of expectations. You know, we tend to have all of these ideas of what our partner should be, what they should do, the way they should act when they're in our company, the way that they should act when they're not in our company, and we don't often communicate these. You know, we just assume, oh yeah, they know, and the thing is they don't know. And until you actually talk talk to each other about your expectations. And sometimes expectations can be completely unreasonable. They can be very much based on, as I said, conditioning, social conditioning, what your friends are doing, what your family blueprint for relationships was, and they're not always realistic. And I think it's so important that couples sit down and negotiate the terms of the relationship as early as possible. And I know I always say that, and it's so clinical, but the reality is, if that communication isn't there, then neither person knows where their boundaries are. Neither person understands what the limitations of the relationship are. And as a result, both people kind of are just feeling their way, as opposed to actually knowing what is required. And that's not about putting rules on a relationship. It's just being realistic about what the requirements are within it. Likewise, communicating your needs. I mean, there's certain things that aren't all that important to us, and there's some things that are really, really important to us. And if we're continuing to ask for them and our needs aren't being met, eventually we're going to get fed up. Eventually we're just going to break away from the relationship. So it's about being very honest about these things from the offset, and it's not always an easy conversation to have. Likewise, I recommend that couples have a regular audit where you sit down and you review boundaries and you review your needs and you review how you're feeling in your relationship, so that things don't kind of get carried away and all of a sudden become a big problem. You're kind of dealing with things as they arise. And this sounds so simplistic, and yet so many couples struggle to do it. I mean, it's like having an intimate conversation with our partner about what it is that we actually need from them is such a challenge for us, because it's not a skill that we've really ever had to develop, or that that has ever been passed on to us. And yet it is so important. And just another note on relationships. Whatever it is that you expect from your partner, make sure that you're willing to give it. I mean, oftentimes we talk about, he's not paying attention, or he's not giving me freedom, or, he's kind of overbearing, or I'm not getting enough affection, or whatever it is, and we don't actually give what it is that we're looking for. So as I said, it all comes back to, in order to connect, being able to self-reflect, to be very aware of your faults and your failings, also aware of your strengths. I mean, I'm not asking people to hammer themselves on a daily basis. I mean, that's certainly an issue of mine. I see all of the things that I do wrong in my relationship, and sometimes I forget, there's some things that I do right as well. But it's about kind of being realistic about who you are, what it is that you bring to the relationship, and what it is that you need to work on and improve on in order for the two of you to go from strength to strength. If you would like to work on yourself in order to better show up for your relationship, and that doesn't necessarily just mean with a romantic partner, it can be in any of your relationships, your relationship with your kids, your relationship with your work colleagues. I mean, the more self-aware we are, the better off in life we're going to be. So if you'd like to work with me, get in touch with me on the website. It is fundamentals.ie.